MusicalTalk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. And with the news that Potty The Plant is coming to London, let's hear the insanely catchy, eponymous theme tune to that wonderful show.
Well, it's a beautiful day, and it might be cliche. I feel like everything is gonna be okay. My life's like a dream, I just want to be seen with my leaves looking green. Oh, and lean, the kids are out to play. They chase the clouds away. The sun's come out to say hey.
Hello!
Hello, 'cause I am Potty the Plant. Come and take my hand. We'll go on adventures in a faraway land. I am Potty the Plant. I'm not one to be missed. We'll learn to exist, flourish and sun-kissed. I am Potty the Plant. Oh, such a beautiful day.
When all your worries seem far away,
I feel so excited.
Potty, I'm delighted.
Everything's okay today. Hey, I'm Potty the Plant. Come and take my hand. We'll go on adventures in a faraway land. I am Potty the Plant. I'm not one to be missed. We'll learn to exist, flourish and sun-kissed. I am Potty the Plant. I am Potty the Plant. The Plant.
Hello and welcome to another edition of MusicalTalk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and you may recall I've been pondering the idea of gardening musicals, which has set me thinking along the lines of that great Frank Lesser show, How to Pluck Seeds in Business Without Really Trying. Well, it doesn't take a genius to work out that probably I'm going to be talking about some gardening-related show, or at least something with a horticultural flavour. A botanical bent, if you will. And that's exactly right. And frankly, it's not that difficult to work out, bearing in mind I told you at the top of the episode that we were going to be talking about Potty the Plant. And so we are, but not just that great show. We're going to be talking about its sister show too, Fringe, ! The musical. And we're going to do so over this week and next week's episodes. But the thrill for me is that for the second time in a month, I'm able to say that one of MusicalTalk's pick of the Fringe shows from the last few years is about to premiere in London. A few weeks ago, it was the miraculous pop-off Michelangelo, still playing in London at the moment, in June and early July 2025. But from the 24th of June until the 28th, so for 1 week only, at the amazing and indeed legendary Wilton's Music Hall in East London, you can see Potty the Plant. And it's the first of at least 2 opportunities to see this fantastic show this year, because it then goes back to the Edinburgh Fringe for a hat-trick. It's going up there for its 3rd year. And it's a well-deserved return for Potty the Plant, because anyone who's listened to MusicalTalk for a while will know that it's a show that absolutely knocked my little socks off. It's a funny, satirical, clever musical with insanely catchy songs, and is actually, when you look at it just a little bit more deeply, doing something quite subversive. Not least the fact that every song purports to express an emotion or an idea, and then subverts that idea or emotion through the format or performance of that song. Now, the people responsible for Potty the Plant are Baden Jack Burns, Burns and Aeddan Sussex. And when Potty came to Edinburgh in 2023, we made that MusicalTalk's Pick of the Fringe for 2023. In 2024, the show came back, but this time with an additional show. And that was Fringe, ! The musical. I do make a point of adding that exclamation mark because there was another musical called Fringe the Musical at Edinburgh in 2024 without the exclamation mark, so it is important. And last year I managed to sit down with Aeddan, Baden and Sarah to talk about both their shows. Now, this week we're going to be concentrating slightly more on Fringe, ! The musical, and next week we're going to be concentrating slightly more on Potty the Plant. But all conversations flow back and forth, and so if you listen to the 2 episodes together, you'll hear the full conversation where we discuss both shows in some detail. But what are they about, I hear you saying? It's a very good question, and I know you repeatedly ask it. And it is my pleasure, as always, to respond. Fringe! The musical might best be described thus. Chantelle Dupre always dreamed of becoming a star. From her humble upbringing in an American Midwestern town, she decides to travel across the pond to perform a one-woman show at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in search of fame and fortune. Will she get her big break? Or will she discover some uncomfortable truths? Fringe, the musical, tackles the deep relationship between an artist's ego and their art, crammed full of catchy tunes, witty humour, and larger-than-life characters. And Fringe the musical was written by Sarah and Baden Burns. But don't forget, that's the sister show to Potty the Plant, which is coming to London in June, and I'll be telling you how you can see that and what that show's about if you didn't know at the end of the episode. And just to make the episode even more thrilling and exciting, we've got 2 songs from Fringe the musical to play. So in just a minute, you'll hear one of those songs from Fringe the musical. Then we'll hear the first half of that wonderful conversation with Aeddan, Baden and Sarah. Then there'll be another song from Fringe. Then I'll tell you all the details about Potty the Plant at the Wilton's Music Hall in East London and how you can book to see Potty the Plant, one of the great musicals of the last few years to come out of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Well, that's me having laid out everything you're going to get. Let's start exactly as I said, with a song from Fringe, the musical.
So here we are. This is better than gold. You could kill me with a smile, and I know you're on my side when the road is rough ahead. And there it is. You will never grow old. I know I'm not the same, but I know you're not to blame. You'll be waiting for me till the end of time. So turn back the clocks and I'll say that I'm sorry to when I was 17. You were enough, I was blind, and I'm sorry to when I was 17. To when I was 17. And so it goes. The sun rises each day. You were open to forgive. You desired for me to live. I'll be living up to you for all my life. So turn back the clocks and I'll say that I'm sorry to when I was 17. You were enough, I was blind, and I'm sorry to when I was 17. To when I was 17. All of my life, they say I've been lucky. All of those fights, I know I've been lucky. Lucky knowing you. So turn back the clocks and I'll say that I'm sorry to when I was 17. You were enough, I was blind, and I'm sorry to when I was 17. to when I was 17, to when I was 17.
Hello, I am Baden Jack Burns. I am the writer, performer, other things that I can't remember. Director as well, yeah.
That old thing.
Unfortunately, the choreographer of Potty The Plant and Fringe the musical.
Yes, my name is Sarah Burns. Oh, that's new. Sarah Burns. I am one of the writers, the producer, and one of the performers for both Fringe the musical and Potty The Plant.
And my name is Aeddan Sussex. I am also a co-writer for Potty The Plant and now a performer in Fringe the musical.
You are indeed. In fact, you open the show, I think, don't you, more or less?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes I do.
We should be exploring your newfound talents.
Oh, actually, I'm also in Potty now, which is a new addition, but we'll get on to
Oh,
that.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, listeners will remember that Potty the Plant was our pick of the Fringe last year, 2023. It's back here in 2024, and I'm delighted by that. But it brings a sister show with it called Fringe the musical, and we're going to be talking about that in just a minute. But I think before we do, let's set the scene. Potty the Plant was a fabulous show last year. Did you always expect to bring it back this year? And did you ever expect to sort of do any tinkering to it? I suppose the question is, what is the journey for Potty from last year to this year?
Well, I think we always hoped that we would bring Potty back. It was never the idea that he would just be a one-year thing and kind of whatever happens, happens. We very much used last year as a tester as to whether or not it would be worthwhile for us doing. And I'm very happy to say that after last year, we decided actually it was very worthwhile us doing. But we always hoped that we'd be bringing it back, so we're very pleased to have been brought it back. Yeah.
Yeah, with that momentum that we kind of had, especially towards the end of the run last year, it felt like it would be a waste to not bring it back because it started to really pick up and there started to be fans for it. And even throughout the year, when there are people kind of asking us online, like, oh, so where's the soundtrack? How can I listen to this? Can I ever see this again?
It's really piqued people's interest, doesn't it? It's
Yeah. And it's nice to have these people expecting more from it. So I think there was always this kind of plan that we had to bring it back for another year.
There was always a sense, wasn't there, as well, that it had the potential to become a cult.
Yes.
I suppose the question I've got for the three of you then really is, what did you learn from last year? You know, when you finally woke up sometime towards the end of September,
Yep.
you know, what you must have at some, did you sit down, the three of you, and actually say, well, you know, did you have the overt conversation, what we learned, or was it subliminal? What went well, what went badly?
Well, I think in terms of the production side of things, I very much had a discussion with my other production partner and also with Baden to just kind of say, right, okay, if we're doing this again, let's just decide that we're doing it again. Did it go well enough? Yes, it did. Okay, we'll redo it again.
That's a producer's hat.
Yes,
I hear
exactly.
That.
In terms of the script, though, I think it was not until we had the actual confirmation that we could bring it back a second time, once we'd actually had our application approved, that we all sat down together as writers and said kind of what needs changing, what worked last year, what didn't, where could we actually save a little bit of time as well, because it was very close to overrunning each time, and was there anything that we wanted to do that was really drastically different.
And what did you conclude from that? Because obviously there's a follow-on question, which is what came out of that? Because, you know, from a punter's point of view, I saw it last year twice, I've seen it this year once, it didn't seem narratively vastly different.
No,
In fact, I couldn't really spot a difference.
Yeah, no.
We took out a song.
Did you?
Yes.
Ooh, now.
And now the fact that you can't remember it is
Yeah,
exactly
everything,
why we took it
yeah.
out.
Come on, you must put me out of my misery.
So it was the one where, when Miss Lacey enters for the first time, she sings essentially the same song that Potty has just sung about her, but doing it in a very kind of silly, dancing around the stage like a fairy princess kind of way.
It's a relic from the short film that we just took out. Yeah.
It's the Lacey cleanup song. That's kind of
Yeah.
what it was.
It makes no difference to the plot whatsoever. The only real benefit that it had was that it introduced the idea of Miss Lacey as this almost Disney princess-esque character, and so we thought, well,
A source of positivity.
there's got to be some way to kind of make that very clear without having to sacrifice time to an entire song that doesn't necessarily drive the plot forward at all.
And that's where the bird gag came from. So we thought, well, the easiest way to show that someone's like a Disney princess is to have them talking to little woodland creatures and stuff like that. And we put our dumb twist on it as usual and have it kind of pulled on the fishing wire.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I remember the joke. That's interesting though. That I didn't spot the cut. So you're right. It it obviously didn't serve the narrative last year.
No, it was a pacing problem. It's also you already have the character singing the song "Unhappy," which is their character's song, but then singing some beforehand just for the sake of because it was in the short film, and we felt like we have to keep all the songs from the short film type of crack. So it just cleaned up everything, and I feel like just having a little gag there kind of just solves that character issue. But yeah, there was that, and there was a lot of tiny things, and a lot of tiny jokes here and there, stuff with like
things to cut or just polish or add, or a bit of everything.
I think mainly change.
Yeah.
Like we
changed
rewrote
wording
a couple
of
jokes
things,
and performance issues. Well, not issues, but the way certain jokes were performed and stuff like that. I know there were a lot of things.
There's a lot of jokes last year that we were trying to figure out if it was just the writing that was suffering, or it was like the performance, or hadn't.
It can be a mixture of both, can't it, as well?
So this year a lot of the script has stayed the same, but we're getting laughs where we wouldn't do last year because we kind of tweaked the performance of things. So we're getting a lot more laughs overall.
But this is good thinking, if you don't mind me saying, because what's wonderful is the fact that you're having these conversations and you've had these thoughts. Because with the greatest respect in the world, a lot of people who've got a really good show bring it up again another year and leave it as that really good show. They haven't necessarily. You keep it in the cupboard for a year, you need to polish it.
Yeah.
Well, we've already got ideas for a 2-act version of it.
Excellent.
So, we're going to add a few songs in, and we've got more narrative through lines and jokes and stuff like that. So this show is kind of relatively the same. It's more just a lot of like small tweaks.
A bit of a brush and a tidy up, but nothing too drastic.
Things that never quite landed exactly like we wanted them to. And in all fairness, there's still things that don't quite sit
Depends on the
exactly
audience.
where we want
Sometimes
to.
people, sometimes it flips with certain jokes. There's 2 jokes I think in the show where one of them gets a laugh from a certain set of audience, and then one gets a laugh from another.
You can actually sort your audience. Oh gosh, it's time to do Venn diagrams.
Yes.
That don't work so well on radio.
No, it really is. It isn't like a spectrum. It's just one set of audience finds one thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought you were suggesting that if you've got an older crowd in, they like this joke but not this one, and if you've got a younger crowd in,
sometimes that is the case.
Usually when it's an older crowd, they're absolutely creasing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of old-fashioned gags in there.
Well, I've got to mention it. My generation, and I'm older than you by a country mile, I'm very sad to say, the Muppet Show was a great thing in the 70s and 80s, and there's it's not the same thing at all, but there's a kind of relatable humour that the Muppet Show does, which this show also has in spades. I wouldn't call it a Muppety show, even though it's got a puppet in it, but it has got a broad but pointed sense of humour, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like everyone saying it's like Little Shop of Horrors, just because it has a puppet.
It's easy to fall into the parallels are obvious, but actually they're bigger than there's much more sophisticated stuff going on there. Can anyone ever be happy with the final version of a show? The old story that shows never stop. They just stop being developed.
No, I've got so much more for it. It's just right now, which we'll talk about in Fringe, but the 60-minute time constraint was always a
problem, really.
Always a problem, and I think that's an issue. It's not an issue, but it's a thing with the Fringe that you're not going to get an offer from a venue if it's over. You can. It is doable.
If you're the Royal Scottish Conservatoire, you can have the 2.5-hour slot.
You can do whatever you want. But if you're trying to compete with a lot of other brilliant performers, you want to fit neatly into that schedule. Yeah. And that's an issue we had with Potty, and probably more with Fringe the musical, which we'll
talk about in any minute.
Yeah.
But so that's Potty. So you knew it was coming back.
Yes.
This conversation will come back to Potty and its future, and I was really delighted to hear the possibility of a 2-act version, because I think it could bear that very, very nicely. It's very clear to me, even just speaking to the 3 of you, actually, that there's still thoughts, enthusiasm and delight in this, and if you're still getting fun out of it, and the audience are, there's obviously no reason to stop, but let's not put our eggs in one basket yet. But what you've done this year is something which I always think is incredibly brave. You've brought up 2 shows, you're doing them on the trot, so your slot is in fact... I assume it's an hour and a half. It starts at noon with Fringe.
Yeah.
It must be No, it's 2.5 hours, isn't it? Half hour.
So, yeah, we start setting up at about 11:30 and we don't finish until about 3 o'clock.
Having a nice sweet tea with 8 sugars, I imagine.
I'm so tired. But there's an advantage to having them on the trot, that some people will come and see a show simply because they can see 2 straight after each other without having to like change location. Like the audience get to go downstairs and get a half hour to get a drink and go to the loo and things like that. The only disadvantage is that we don't really have a lot of time. We don't have any time in between the 2 shows, where if the first one was okay in terms of ticket sales, if the second one needs a bit of help, we don't have time to kind of go out and try and persuade more people to come in.
No, of course.
Yes.
It's a logistical choice first, really, isn't it? It seems to me.
Yeah,
it must be.
It mostly came down to which slots we were offered this year.
I'm going to make a vulgar joke, but life's like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something that we got offered, and we thought, well, actually, it'll be an interesting decision to see whether or not we can do it that way.
See if we can get people in at that time.
Yeah.
Because I think last year a lot of people may have came because it was on at 6 o'clock. They've seen something else and what's this weird plant show, Yeah. But this year it feels like people are coming just specifically to see Potty the Plant.
Yeah.
So
it does have a bit of a reputation already. I mean, it's really helpful if that's the case.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that we would have been seeing quite the numbers that we have been seeing this year if it hadn't been for that reputation. Because
your online presence.
A full-scale dark comedy musical at 1:30 in the afternoon is a little bit of a hard sell, if I'm honest. But we have found that our other show, actually Fringe the musical, has been a bit of a hard sell, because a lot of people that are at the Fringe to see musicals, more often than not, they are only just about starting their day at 12 o'clock, realistically.
Yeah.
So it's our actual pool of like people that we can try and grab from is not as big as it was.
I also think it's a slightly smaller Edinburgh this year, or certainly the first week has been. It feels to me slightly thinner on the ground, not massively so, but it's tangible. And the people I've been talking to, incidentally, have all been saying something similar. A lot of people are finding it. Yeah. Things are not selling in the way they expected or have done in the past. And
we've heard that as well.
Yeah, there's a kind of universality to that position, which can only presumably suggest that everyone's feeling that. And it's going to be a number of things. Distractions like the Olympics, the cost of living crisis, Yeah. So what I will do, I genuinely like to come back to Potty in a minute and talk about the new production and how it's going. And Aeddan, your new performance, your new
starring role.
Well, as it's sort of Godfather and father, I suppose, actually, if you want to play the whole game, it's only right that somehow that you've been dragged on stage. So we'll talk about that.
Well, it was my idea to do it. No one forced me to do it.
Yeah.
But you're also in Fringe, and let's talk about Fringe, therefore, because actually Fringe is your new offering. I know you were thinking of it last year, and I know that you've had a particularly busy year.
Yes, we have. We've moved house twice.
Which is enough.
We got married, which we planned the entire wedding in only 6 months, which is, again, what the heck was I thinking?
You are a producer.
Well, there is that. And yeah, we've had a lot of family things as well, so we've just had one of the busiest years of our lives, really.
But life always gets in the way, and yet you've done it. And actually, Fringe is a terribly good show.
Oh.
But it's very, very different to Potty, or so it seems to me. Or rather, the similarities are in a sense of humour. But it isn't doing the same things. So this is that difficult second album, How do you make your second album distinctly different from the first, and yet also retain all the things that people like about the first? So before I give you my observations, I'd like to hear how you've done that.
Well, we didn't want to do another Potty because we don't want to just be the same thing every year, and we didn't want to be the adult comedy. We wanted to do something that was for everyone.
Yeah.
So I guess it was a task in trying to see if we can get the same type of humour without the vulgarity to it or the swearing. But it was just a great way to just kind of like pinpoint things that we have problems with the Fringe and make fun of, because when we did it last year, obviously it was an amazing experience, but there was just so much to, sorry for my French, take the piss out of.
No, it's fine. I think get away with that.
I should be alright. Yeah, and even
satirical observation.
Even though that may, but we wanted to add a bit of sincerity, because Potty lacks any in the slightest.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of people found, I think with Potty you either adore that or you think, it needs something, but I find it bit funny when there's just no sincerity and stuff. So this was finally a time to...
It's a cliche sometimes to pop sincerity into things anyway, and
Yeah.
we also know what people mean by sincerity. They often mean a love story. And there is a love story, it just doesn't happen to be a sincere one.
No,
so,
exactly.
Or rather, it's also one that's very difficult to...
There was an opportunity to make a love story in it, but I completely cut that down. But it was just because everything in all the characters are based off real people. I'm not going to mention who they are.
No, quite.
And,
If you want them still in your life. No.
And they were based off people who we met at the Fringe last year. Especially, So the main,
individuals or types or both?
Both. So the main character of Chantal Dupree is based off somebody who we met at the Fringe.
Yeah.
We've obviously exaggerated it, but
weirdly, she's actually become even more of a parody of someone else that we have now met subsequently this year as well. Like it's one of those kind of retroactive things where she's all of a sudden she's taking on a new life for me in my mind because she's. Like, this is not somebody that we knew last year, but weirdly, the similarities are very, very...
Noticeable?
Yeah, noticeable. It's... Yeah.
So she's informing or... Because you play the central character in Fringe.
Yes.
And it's really interesting that you're still informing that character from life in real time.
Yeah. It's one of the joys, actually, of having a brand new show that we're still very much kind of in the early stages of developing and working out.
Your jelly hasn't set yet.
No, it really hasn't. It's very, very fluid still. So, like, as we're going, when stuff is coming up and we're getting comments, or we're meeting other people, or we're doing other things, we're able to kind of play with it a little bit and work out what's gonna work.
I think because we had so much, I wouldn't say confidence, but since we've done it before, last year we were terrified of taking Potty to the Fringe. Just it's an unknown thing, and I've never performed at the Fringe. I have no context of it. I've obviously seen shows, but with this we've had a bit more of like, well, it's not this weird, scary thing anymore. So I think we left the writing. I think it was like 2 days before we had to hand off the scripts to the actors. We just kind of a wedding and then and then developing all like that. So we have to get this done. So I wouldn't say it was rushed per se, but it was. I think that's just how we do things. I think Potty was very last minute as well. So that's like something that we always like.
But it also depends on how your creative minds work, because it's absolutely possible that at the back of your mind there's a subroutine going on which is chugging away at bits and pieces without you realising it, and actually therefore leaving it until quite late, so it's had a chance to sort of gestate and develop and. Really can work.
Well, one of our songs called "The Critics Knows Best." That I think that was written like a couple of days before we had to get that, and I just kind of whipped it together.
The chorus of that was definitely written very last minute. It was all that was a bit of a rush job, but actually it's weirdly turned into one of my favourite ones. And I think we're learning that sometimes our first instinct with things is
the correct one.
Sometimes right.
Yeah,
it's not always right. We are well aware of that, but more often than not, the kind of like the gut instinct in those moments, there's a reason why it's there. We had elements of Fringe the musical very much chugging away at the back of our minds for a very, very long time. But the kind of the actual getting them down on paper and things like that, we needed the adrenaline of we've only got 2 weeks left. Let's get this down.
And we thought the story was straightforward enough that it would just land perfectly in a 60-minute. We probably thought, it might be a 50-minute, which would be nice for us. But then it just you start adding stuff to it, and it got really over. It's gotten to the point now where it could easily be a full thing if we wanted to. But obviously, you have to fit into that 60-minute time slot. So like very last-minute rewrites to try and get that
boil it down.
So in the third act, that's why it's so like, right, let's just get this. Let's get this wrapped up.
But here's a question for you: is it better, do you think, and it's an open question, to write too much then having to boil it down, or not write enough and then have to pad it out?
I think boiling it down is a lot better.
You get a better brew, I think.
Yeah, what you end up doing is you pick the stuff that really matters, and you dispose of the stuff that actually really doesn't.
Is disposable.
Potty was like that.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
very much so. We had discussions to and from about certain things. I think we allow ourselves indulgent moments. We have one indulgent moment in Potty. And we have at least 1 or 2 indulgent moments in Fringe. But they're not massively indulgent because actually when we were talking about them the other day as to whether or not they would be something that we could take out if we needed the time back, they actually ended up being kind of key elements that provide the backdrop of the Fringe. So we have a running gag with a silent disco.
I was going to mention this.
We have a whole section with an improv duo.
In the old script, they were going to be brought back multiple times.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Because in Potty, there's a lot of reoccurring jokes. So they even get set up in the first scene, gets brought back in like and we like doing that. But with Fringe, we had to cut a lot of gags.
But there was a lot of things that we actually realised that even though they didn't massively serve the plot, we actually kind of needed to keep them in, because without them, it could just be a story that was happening anywhere. Yeah. We kind of had to create the fabric of the Fringe to kind of give the story, because the story could theoretically live outside of the Fringe.
Yes, absolutely,
very easily. But we wanted it to have this kind of backdrop.
Fringy context.
Yeah, exactly. Plus also it's some of the best laughs that we get, especially when the silent disco comes on.
Well, it's recognisable, and funny enough, I'm very glad you didn't cut that, because I agree with you absolutely. For me as an audience member, the moment that came on, and I think it comes on twice in the version I've seen, that immediately, many of us will have seen that on the way into the auditorium, and if not, at 1,000 other opportunities. And it is highly irritating and annoying, because you're just walking along. For people who don't know what a silent disco is, there's a crocodile of people in a row, with all wearing headsets. And they are, they're getting dance routines and music played to them as they walk through the streets. But they're often persuaded to sing and dance along. And so every now and then you're minding your own business, and suddenly 40 people in a row take up the street, and they all start dancing, and, well, they look like they've been taken over by aliens, to be brutal. But and
they're always pretending like they're having so much of a great time, because they've been encouraged to.
They're being corralled into it. Absolutely. If you were able to take all those people out individually, one by one, have a 5-minute exit interview with them, and then say, would you have done that again? Would you have liked the opportunity to leave halfway through? I think I know the outcome.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, we play into that. But those are the kind of, I think those are the moments where you really do see our sense of humour as well. Because that's the kind of that's the Potty sense of humour, that kind of irreverent, satirical, slightly over the top humour as well, because it's
to the nth degree, isn't it?
We kind of take something and do unnecessary.
We want to do a thing where a lot of the side characters are that Potty level over the top, but then a lot of the central characters do have a certain level of groundness. Obviously, it levels each way. For instance, there's a character called Jem, who is the straight man, just very, because he's the only one that's not really a performer. So he's the one that's coming in from an outside perspective, and that's why everyone else is crazy, because theatre people are nuts. And the Fringe is nuts, and reviewers are crazy. Everyone's just mad in this thing that we do for less than a month. So he's the only one that's coming in of going okay, why should we care about this? I'm just here.
He's the reality linchpin who's walked into an absurdist story, actually, and the tension. That's an interesting tension immediately. I mean, forgive me. Let's talk structurally, if I may, without giving too much away. There are essentially two plots, aren't there? There's our central character's story as she sort of comes to the Fringe, and then we've got Jem's story, and then of course the two stories intertwine to a degree. And then, without saying anything, there's a terribly moving ending, which is, I would say, a twist ending, if I may use that. I was not expecting what happened, and what happened was sensitively and sincerely dealt with and done nicely, and actually changed the attitude of the piece, or for me as an audience member, I was very keyed into the comedy all the way through. You used the word Act 3, and I think that's very, very sound. You've chaptered it, if it makes sense. And that third chapter of 3 is earned, but takes the show in a very different direction, which Potty sort of doesn't do. And actually that's why this show is clearly from the same stable, but also sufficiently different not to be. It's not a rehash.
Yes.
They're both very individual things in their own right, and I quite like that. One of the great things about Potty is it's subversive, as I said last year. I love the fact that every song is the complete opposite of what it's saying it is, and I just love that. W.S. Gilbert would be proud. That is topsy-turvy. So if you want to be the heir of Gilbert, you're very welcome. That's that for me. That's an accolade. But I love that. But actually, the songs, even the comic songs, whilst they're send-ups in Fringe, are not doing quite the same thing. So even the comedy is from the same school, but not the same you're not banging the same drum.
Yeah, I didn't want, because Potty, you know, I don't want to put down Potty like I seem to do all the time, but the songs are just, like, especially with the short film ones, there was stuff that I wrote in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just
I'm stunned though, still.
Just to make Aeddan laugh. But we added a few songs with Potty, like songs like "Gonna Happy," where I actually, you know, put effort into it. And you know, in the end
You
of Act
undersell
One,
yourself.
and one of the end of Act One, you know, so there are a few things that balance out the stupidity of it. But with Fringe, I just wanted to do. I didn't want to do like flat out comedy songs. I know there's little nodes of comedy, but I wanted to do actual musical theatre.
Good music.
I remember as well when I first read the script, which was probably after you'd sent it to the cast as well.
But you are in the cast.
You are in the cast, yeah.
You've got it at the same
With my
time.
one line.
Got to start somewhere, Mr. DeMille.
So after reading it, I remember coming up and thinking with like suggestions for like just really dark jokes that would fit perfectly in Potty, but obviously was not the tone. And I remember telling you guys, and you're like, it's just not the tone that we're going for Fringe. And it's like at that point, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I understand what you were.
Because we could have
Tonally, why it's different.
We could have easily went that direction, but like I said, we didn't want to do the same.
Yeah.
Because we could have just been like, oh, we're taking the piss out of the Fringe, and that's the whole show. But
It's much more than that.
It's more of a. We wanted it to be, the Fringe was more like a backdrop.
Yeah.
More
It's a
than anything.
moving backdrop, actually, by which I mean physically moving.
Yeah.
You know, if this feels to me, if you had all the resources in the world and you were on at the Palladium, what I would expect to see is an enormous back projection with lots of people constantly moving.
Absolutely.
So almost it's got no still point, because the show also moves on not having a still point. You know, everyone's moving all the time.
Yeah, completely. It moves from storyline to storyline and character to character so quickly as well that kind of it has a real kinetic kind of feeling to it, which is what we were trying to get across with the directing and the choreography and the just the style of it. Unfortunately, what it does mean is that we have a couple of characters who have giant suitcases full of props and costumes that they have some insanely quick changes out of and into.
Me and Steph pretty much play all the side characters.
You do indeed, yeah.
So I have a secret role which you don't see because behind the stage I'm constantly like grabbing clothes and quick changing them into.
You're a valet today.
His wardrobe.
So that's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, and it's been incredibly useful actually to have like an extra person who has been able to help with those kind of things, but also kind of like bulk out some of the scenes and do other bits and pieces. There were several times where we were reading the script and we were like, oh, a random person walks in.
I know a random person.
Thought, who on earth is going to play the random person because everyone's already on stage? So it's been really, really useful.
And I think it was that, and I didn't want to cast myself as the main character again. I wanted to play, because I enjoy doing side, like putting on a silly hat and a silly voice.
There's a lot of fun in multi-character play.
I agree. I feel the main characters are overrated in a lot of things. Honestly, like it's like the nurses and Potty are the best characters, aren't they, to play? You know. So
Tuesday.
That's insane.
That's insane.
So I enjoy doing all the little silly, just one-liners.
It definitely beats being under a desk the entire hour. So.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, Aeddan, because, forgive me, you know, we keep talking about the fact you have a role. You never envisage yourself on being on stage in Potty. You never envisage yourself on being on stage in this, I imagine. You know, you don't see yourself as a performer in that sense. You're a creator, but not a performer. How are you finding performing? I appreciate it's not the biggest of roles, but you do open the show. You know, you're the warm-up man or the encouraging the audience person in an American chat show studio, aren't you? But you know, people are looking at you when you come on. You are that person, so that's a big ask of someone who doesn't naturally do that. Or do you now naturally do that?
Oh, he's always been a little performer. He's just
have you?
Yeah.
But it's really funny for me because I'm like on stage along with 6 other amazing performers, and I'm completely out of my depth there. And,
he's not. He's so comfortable with it.
But I mean, like the last time I'd been on stage or done anything was probably like high school or something, like GCSE drama. Well, I think I did A level. So it's been years since I've done it.
But you have done it.
But when we're at uni, like, it would be great just jumping in front of camera and doing like a silly skit for like a weekly, like project that we would do on a weekly basis at uni. So it's not like
I guess I always loved.
There's a side of you that's a performer then.
Yeah. But I don't view myself as a performer. Like even doing Fringe stuff, even though I am performing there, I still kind of like just see myself as a side thing that's going on.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask? There's you. I should say this as someone who is a critic. There is a song which says, "Well, would you like to say what it's called?"
So it's called "The Critics Know Best," and the inspiration for it very much came from some of the critical reviews that we had of Potty last year.
It's a well-known thing here in Edinburgh that reviewing is incredibly varied, and I've said this on the record before, and I'll say it again: citizen journalism, which I am a flower of. This is Musical Talk, can be brilliant. It's a marvellous and accessible thing, but of course it's also real people doing it, and everyone's opinion will be different, and not everyone understands what it is to be a critic, with the greatest respect. So I was delighted to hear that song, and I laughed my way through it. I can imagine some others may not, but it's a bold move.
It's one of those decisions that is either going to go down incredibly well or very badly. There's no real kind of mid-ground to it. We don't overtly say that like the critics are awful and everything like that. The way that we tried to perform it is that it's like Chantel is reading these reviews, and in her mind they're coming out far worse than they actually are on the page, because everyone does that.
Well, we amplify, don't we?
We all read a review that has a slight negative comment on it, and we all bulk it up in our head until it is literally the worst thing in the world, and they're telling you that you're a horrible person and you should just quit. And so we wanted to play it a little bit like that, but we did also want to kind of create a silly villainy moment.
Yeah, we were thinking like Potiphar and like Joseph, like that type of,
Potty The Plant.
That's so. It's like they've all got like monocles and glasses, all like very uptighty, and we just thought just that stereotype.
I sit before you wearing a top hat. So.
Of course,
exactly.
And a monocle.
Right.
So we just thought it'd be just really funny.
Would you like more caviar, by the way?
It's
good, isn't it? Yes.
But honestly, we can try to justify it, but we just think it's really funny. Just the idea of us going to the Fringe and just taking the piss out of reviewers.
Yeah.
But it's got to be done because the reviewing community is part of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and the Edinburgh Festival Fringe it's a trade show, and actually reviewers are part of that. And as a part of that, we need to be picked up on when we do things wrong, or satirically skewered in, I don't know, a piece of musical.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not just them that we that we poke fun at. We poke fun at the silent discos. Also, the improv duo is one of my favourite gags.
Improv would take the piss out of.
Massively.
I think magicians get a fairly easy ride from you, though, if you don't mind me saying. They've taken over they are like mould in a cold house. They start in the corner and you pay no attention, and the next time you go in, they're up a wall, and then 2 weeks later they've covered the room, and you've got to have people in.
Oh, I've never heard it described like that before.
I'm not an enormous fan of prestidigitation.
Yes, no. That was one that we didn't manage to kind of.
I didn't even think of magicians.
No.
Did you not?
No.
What a peaceful, happy life you must lead.
I don't think about them.
Yeah.
No, but that is something that can stay in our mind as if we ever need to change things up a little bit. That's another kind of. Yeah.
There are lots of moving targets at Edinburgh, and that's just one of another. But, forgive me, I also think it's quite interesting that satirically, it appears to me that you're also putting yourselves up for pillory, particularly I think in the character of the clapped out composer, who basically he has one hit. He's had one hit musical, and he's been sort of trading on his excellence ever since, but hasn't been up to it.
Yeah.
Now there is a reading, but this is your difficult second album, and that character can in some way be read as, will our further show, having had a hit with Potty, will that fall foul of the critics? Forgive me, I quite like the fact that
you got it spot on.
Yeah, but I quite like the fact you propped yourself in there, but you're not doing that terrible thing, sitting on the wall and throwing rocks at people. You're standing amongst. Yeah, exactly. You're standing amongst the people, and you've targeted yourself as well as everyone else.
It's almost like therapy for us, kind of thinking like, oh, are we? You know, you're right, because the second album is always, you know, you think. I always think of. Like what Tarantino, he did like Jackie Brown after Pulp Fiction. Yeah. Is, you know, I think it's sick, but it's so different that people go like, well, that's not Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. So why aren't I getting more of the same?
Why am I getting more of the same? Yeah.
I've been criticising you for doing something different. Yeah, I mean, it's
you know, because we could have easily done, because we're thinking of doing like Beyblades the musical. It's like a really stupid another Potty. You know.
Can we announce that?
Yeah, do it. Screw
yeah,
and,
why not?
Yeah, but I thought like we'll do something that's, you know, has a bit more dialogue heavy and a bit more self-reflective and a tough one that we know is going to be really difficult to please everyone.
I've realised as well that there's a line right near the beginning where the improv duo who are explaining who this clapped out composer is. There's a line where she says, well, the critics said it was too samey and had too much, way too much exposition. I realised throughout the entire show, every now and again, there's a moment where we just couldn't work out a way, in a quick, easy way, to get like the backstory for each of these characters across. And so we literally do then just enter into a realm of exposition that
you have to info dump occasionally.
Yeah,
you really
absolutely. We try and kind of mix things up a little bit, and we try and kind of perform them in such a way that doesn't feel too kind of, and then I did this.
My news.
But in all fairness, we do fall into the trap of exposing quite a lot, so it's... Yes, it is what it is.
And it's also, you know, the whole piece is broadly satirical, and other shows do that all the time, so it's very comfortable. It's not clumsy at all, though, I don't think. I didn't think I'll get on with it at any stage. You know, it's nice and pacey, and the timing profile, as you say, is being forced on you, but actually it's also quite useful in some senses. Yeah. You know, that you have to concertina everything in. It gives it pace, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I feel like I would have loved more time to breathe.
And that's the flip side. It really is.
There's also another layer that we've. It's a new edition, which I'm not sure you saw in your reviewing, which is at the end when Edgar's kind of reading out the criticisms and reviews of the show that
he's our composer.
Yeah. We've started incorporating elements of our actual
real
feedback
reviews
from the show into it. So there's that level of meta-ness there.
And is it signal to the audience that that's the case, or is that just an in-joke?
We're still trying to work out if there's a way that we can signal to the audience that kind of like it's okay, we know, but we're trying to take the mick out of our own show essentially as well. Just because I think if you make it quite clear that like you're fine laughing at yourself in these things, people actually tend to look at it with a lot more kindness and a lot more openness.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If everyone's in on a joke and you're not putting yourself on a pedestal,
yes,
people are always happy with that.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, we're still playing around with that one, but then that's the joy of having a brand new show. We can play around with it to our heart's content. We really should have like listed it as a work in progress because it's.
Oh no, well, I think it's good enough. I think it's much better than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
It's a show that it's like a show that will have, and I'm sure you will give it time and development over time. Yeah. So it's not necessarily a finished project, but it's so much more than a work in progress.
Yes.
It absolutely stands on its own two feet. It coheres. It's very funny. I very much enjoyed it.
Oh, lovely.
So I don't know. Don't undersell yourselves at all. Going to ask.
We're just really self-deprecating.
I hear that.
We do it in the show as well. Yeah. We're just like
you can probably tell from the sense of humour if we're honest. Yeah.
Now, I've got a question for you, which then will follow on to another observation. What is it about Starlight Express that you don't like?
I have, as much as I like to deny it to myself, I think I adore Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I think
I've recently had the same epiphany, and it's quite disturbing.
Yeah, I think I've realised that he's like the Spielberg of musical theatre.
That's a really good adaptation.
And I've realised I think he's absolutely amazing. We watched Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and from a songwriting point of view, he's just like, and I think he influences me way more than I want him to.
When you can acknowledge, yes.
We all want to be like Sondheim, don't we? But
It's a song called Everybody Wants to Be Sondheim.
Really? Really? I didn't know that. But with Starlight Express, it's such a ridiculous musical, and I don't think we deliberately went out of our way to we didn't really make fun of it, but it just, because the roller skating thing was an 80s thing, that was just coincidental. And then the Starlight, because just for context, one of the reviews from the Scots person, got nothing to do with the Scotsman, that's a completely irrelevant thing. He comes in and says that like his wife has died, because taking her to see Starlight Express too much. It was just, there's no logic to the gag at all. We're not saying Starlight Express is bad by any means. It was just what's the silliest musical you could.
It's actually one of those fun gags, and we write them every now and again, and we don't know exactly what the gag is.
Yeah, you can't analyse it yourself, but you know it lands somehow.
Exactly, somehow, because like we know that him saying, and the missus passed away a few years ago. It turns out there's so many times you can take her to see Starlight Express before she kicks the bucket.
And then Zach started adding Starlight Express ad-libs.
The
trains on skates.
That was just completely...
Yeah, he just added that.
Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things that like we're not even entirely sure why the gag works. We just know that it does. And we also quite liked the idea that this kind of like gruff, burly, manly reviewer, like the idea that his favourite show is Starlight Express.
And he's taken his wife to it so many times that she's died.
Toxicity poisoning, but the interesting thing about it is that I think I can see why that joke works, because I appreciate it. I've just seen Starlight Express for the very first time, really loved it, and exactly as I've been a friend of mine has been making his mission to take me to Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Have you had that epiphany? Because it's easy for us to kind of dismiss him.
Yeah, and that's, I think, culturally in Britain, he's a successful man, and what we do is we say, Andrew Lloyd Webber, he's so successful, isn't that terrible? Yeah. And actually it's a rather wonderful thing, and he's successful because he's jolly good. But it's just culturally easy to sort of sneer, I think. Yes. Yeah. And then it turns out that actually he delivers the goods every bloody time, and it's really rather brilliant. I was saying with Sunset
songs are amazing.
Yeah, and I saw Sunset Boulevard at New Year, and that blew my mind. And he said,
so my friend's went to see Jesus Christ Superstar for the first time this year, and had his mind blown by it.
Wow, like my word.
Yeah. So he does deserve that respect, but I appreciate therefore that I think I can absolutely, that's why that joke works, because I think also if you understand the context in this country of how he's appreciated or otherwise against the actual worth of his work, which is pretty sound, there's a gap in which you can then have a bit of fun. But I said this was going to be the follow-up question. I did say that. There's this lovely scene set in the 80s, or an 80s style dance scene where everyone's on rather attractive roller skates, if I may, side lights as well. I mean, it is the 80s experience of writ large, and I think you all briefly put on sort of leg warmers, and you go for the shoulders and all the 80s stuff. So there is also that circular thing of, isn't Starlight Express a silly show? Well, yes, of course it is. Yeah. And there's your own roller skating experience song.
But it's one of those things, like, there is something weirdly magical about putting performers on roller skates. And we can't quite work it out, but every time they first appear on the stage, you can hear the audience going, ooh. Yeah.
But do you think first of all, it's spectacular, because actually, it does give you more movement than you get just being on your feet, as it were.
Yeah.
There's also the lovely little flavours of the lights on the wheels of at least two of the pairs.
Yeah.
And then there's the jeopardy.
Yes.
Because actually, is this going to go wrong? Because this looks like it can be more likely to go wrong than people dancing their normal choreography.
We nearly slipped today because the stage was slightly worse. From a previous performance.
We've had a different show in there this morning, and the stage quality is not quite what we've been used to.
But it was way more difficult in rehearsals. In rehearsal, we had wooden floors.
Oh, right, so, okay. Much more traction, I imagine.
Yeah.
Friction, possibly.
Yeah, but also little lumps and bumps all over it and things like that. We did initially...
Certainly by the end, I imagine.
We did initially want to have both... so two of the characters, we did want them to have both roller skates on and be doing some proper roller skating.
So it was going to be me and Steph doing it originally, and... we realised how nightmarish it was to actually... Well, I can roller skate, but it's the stopping bit and the safety aspect.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, oh, damn it. Well, okay, we'll take one thing off so we can stop ourselves.
Yeah.
And then Zach and Hudson, our other 2 cast members, they went, well, why can't we skate as well?
Yeah.
Right, okay, because they were just going to be just
Yeah.
80s dancers.
So we shared 2 pairs of roller skates between 4
4
people.
performers.
And
But it still works brilliantly.
it works
though,
beautifully, and it gives them the having that flat shoe on the ground and also the roller skate. It gives them that real ability to make sharp turns and like
And to stop.
quick movements, but also to stop themselves.
Yeah.
Like, if they feel like they're in danger, all they have to do is put that safe foot down, and they're absolutely fine. So that's been a good fun one to learn, and it made the choreography of that scene just so much more fun.
It's very rich, that scene.
Yeah. Adding in the different lighting effects as well, and that's actually one of my favourite songs as well, because there's a moment towards the end of it where everything is still very colourful, very jolly, very joyous, but there's kind of a bit of an acting thing going on that's almost a bit of a gut punch, that very much like gives you a really interesting vision. It's not just a funny, silly song. It's got a real heart to it. It's got an emotion.
But it's also very zeitgeisty at the moment, because if the 80s have ever been in, they're in now.
Yes.
This Fringe has really taught me that. I can barely walk down the road without hearing Blondie and everything.
I don't like the 80s. It was more like
Blasphemy, sir.
so it was kind of like a little indig there.
Just taking a star off. Carry on.
Fringe take a star off. Yeah, the Fringe musical is kind of like a jukebox musical in the sense of
styles.
No, a lot of the songs were written like 10 years ago.
Oh, it's your own jukebox musical.
Yes, technically.
He's jukeboxed himself
I've
somehow.
jukeboxed myself, so that song is coming up to 9 years old.
Is it really?
And it was always about the 80s bar. Now it's been kind of
You've contextualised it in the piece.
Yeah, and that's why there's a story in the 80s, not because that's the plot. That was just because the song needed to be called.
But isn't that interesting that you've come the year that the 80s are so totally in?
Yeah.
It's just all over the place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's a few songs
but
like
I think
that,
it's one of those things as well that like everyone I think at some point has been into some form of themed bar like that.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. And it's not exactly an environment where you're kind of like wrapped in loving bubble wrap and things like that, which is I think
that's a very different club you're talking about there.
Yeah. This character like stepping into this environment, trying to do his normal stand-up thing while he's got this thing of like hoping that his brother turns up as well, but he's also got all this chaos going on around him. I think
distracting, isn't it?
It creates such a brilliant kind of weird scenario that we can like really play with.
Yeah,
Well, it gives it a soundscape. Sorry, Ed.
I just remember having a really funny moment where I obviously didn't know anything about the roller skates until you sent me a random video like mid-rehearsal of Zach like falling over on his back on the skates, and I just remember seeing that and laughing to myself, thinking, "Oh, this is what we're doing."
What a stupid idea!
There's so many things that could go wrong here.
Yeah.
That's sure.
I'm gonna live forever. This is my destiny. I'm gonna rule this city. They won't be expecting me. The trials and tribulations, I'm leaving them all behind. 'Cause I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna live my dream. Da 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 da. Oh, can you feel the air around you
And there we are. That was Aeddan, Baden and Sarah. More accurately, Aeddan Sussex, Baden Burns and Sarah Burns. And we were talking there in Edinburgh last summer about their 2 shows. That's Fringe, the musical, and you've just heard 2 songs from that wonderful show. And of course, their masterpiece, which is Potty the Plant. Now, as I said, Potty the Plant is coming to London, and then it's going on to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe again for a 3rd year. So there are 2 chances to see it in the United Kingdom in the next couple of months. You'll be able to find its Fringe run very easily online, because the EdFringe online catalogue is now very available, and well worth a look, even if you're not going to go to the Fringe this year. But more thrillingly and more immediately, Potty the Plant can be seen at Wilton's Music Hall in East London, very nearly only a stone's throw from the Tower of London. And you can see it in performances at 7:30 every evening from the 24th of June, which is a Tuesday, to the Saturday the 28th of June, and there's also a matinee at 3 o'clock on that occasion. So Tuesday to Saturday with 2 performances on that Saturday the 28th of June. To find out where you can book, go to wiltons.org.uk and book yourself a ticket or 7. And just to remind you what the show is about, let's hear its blurb. This comes from the Wilton's Music Hall website. A charmingly dark, whimsically adult, joyously subversive musical delight. Starring our titular character, Potty, a singing, talking, tap-dancing potted plant. When mysterious events begin to occur at Little Boo Boo's General Hospital, a ragtag bunch of dysfunctional nurses must pull together to save the day. What could be happening to all the missing children? Will the beautiful Miss Lacey ever find true love? And is there more to the nasty-looking Dr. Acula than meets the eye? Potty the Plant is an hour of side-splitting, earwormy musical fun that begs the audience not to take anything too seriously. It's a fabulous show. It is described incidentally as an adult comedy musical, and so it is. And if you get a chance, treat yourself to a very enjoyable evening. And of course, the Wilton's Music Hall is the oldest surviving music hall in the world. And it's been restored in a really interesting way, so you get a real sense of the mid-19th century. It's also got a huge amount of bar space and sitting area, and I love being there. It really is a little slice of history, and combine it with a show like Potty the Plant, and there's really no excuse not to go. Well, that brings this episode of Musical Talk to an end, but not this conversation. Because, as I said earlier, there's the second half of the conversation about Potty the Plant yet to be had, and we'll be hearing some songs from that show in next week's episode. So do join us then if you can. Well, it seems to me the best way to end an episode where the principal conversation has been about a character who is horticultural in nature is to say, pip pip. And so I will. Pip pip. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2025. Except for the songs where the copyright remains with the creators. And my thanks go to Baden Jack Burns for allowing me to play his wonderful songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. And follow us on all the usual social media networks. Do you mind giving me a very quick level?
Saying anything?
Breakfast. Breakfast is usually the option.
Breakfast?
Or lunch, depending
Breakfast.
Okay, breakfast.
Which order do you want to go for?
But what we had for breakfast?
Yeah, just a sound test. It's
I-
not
I-
the
I-
interview.
This is the hardest.
Welcome to
bit.
Breakfast Talk.
I had cornflakes today.
Controversial choice.
I had a multivitamin and a prayer.
A prayer?
just thinking, please get through today.